Well, welcome to another recruiting roundtable. Certainly, you have one guy that's very, very popular that you already know, Matt Lassier on the far left, at the top left screen. Matt does a lot of different things for team or recruiting. So we're excited to have him here. Then also we have a special guest in John Garcia with Rivals coming over. We're so appreciative of John being here. John, thanks for joining us, by the way.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
Matt, I know you got some of the questions that are from our subscribers and members. We might as well kick that off to get that out of the way. What were some of the kind of key questions for people, and we can kind of discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, we'll start off here with our first one from our guy Tony G from DB. He wants to know why Florida State is kind of struggling with linebacker recruiting at this point, because right now they've missed on a few guys, and still have DQ Forkpa and Colton left to decide. Colton's probably the most likely there, but it seems Ole Miss is trending a little more. Just
hmm
what do you think needs to improve
hmm
with linebacker recruiting?
Yeah, I think the main thing there is you're dealing with a new linebackers coach because you're changing everything as far as linebacker coach. You have Coach JP in there switching from defensive end to linebacker. So kids need to see what the product is. I mean, that I think that's the big selling point that they can't really sell until the season starts. So I think it's going to be a lot of in-season recruiting. Certainly they're hoping to pull one of those guys, but there's other targets. But I think it's really one of those an in-season recruiting thing.
And then, John, what are your thoughts on it?
I'm a big fan of Karan
Yeah, yeah.
Maycock in particular, kid down in Miami who moved from safety up to linebacker. So a very modern
Okay.
player who could really fill it up. And then obviously, look, it's one not a great year in the state. I mean, I think everyone at this point looks at Isaiah Williams as maybe that top guy in the state of Florida, and we know he was committed to FSU, and we know FSU still in communication there. That one, far from over by any stretch of the imagination. I think that the season's going to play a big role with him, no matter which schools are sort of in that final analysis for Isaiah. And then, as you guys mentioned, Forkpa's out there, 50-50 shot right now, Florida versus Florida State. And then Colton is another big fish committing here in a couple days. As you mentioned, Ole Miss, certainly the primary competition, but I spoke to a source in Tallahassee this morning that says it's close. They feel cautiously optimistic that is an ongoing conversation and it's not yet settled. So I do think that there is a solid ceiling at the linebacker position, but I think the lack of top prospects in the state and obviously the new coaches all factor into why it maybe hasn't been the strongest position group thus far.
Yeah, and then going to another one from Go Knowles 5. This is a question we've been getting a lot. How many wins do we think Florida State needs to get to kind of keep the majority of this class intact? And then how many wins do you need to get back in it for a guy like Trent Henderson, Sam Rosenbro, Carson Baker, those kinds of guys? Is 7 okay? Do they need to be at 10, 9?
I don't think there's a number. I mean, I think as fans, as adults, we always sort of zoom out and view it from 30,000 feet. These are kids, these are teenagers. It's not a specific number, it's more of a style. I remember this time last year, not to bring up the Gators a ton today, but look, it was bleak, Napier hot seat, a couple commits, and it was like, this is going to be terrible. And then those first few games go down, and they didn't win all of them, but just sort of the style, the energy that they showed began to stabilize things. And then obviously they hit a bit of a hot streak, and that really increased the ceiling of what the class could be. So it was never a number for them, and I think it's the same for Florida State. It's more about stability and getting back on track. You talk to commits, you talk to targets, and everyone talks about, hey, getting things back on track and the belief that Florida State will stabilize. So I think if it feels that way more than the numbers tell us, I think that will kind of take care of business in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I agree a lot with what John had to say there. I think the other thing is I don't think there's a number. I think it's also who you beat. Who you play, who you have wins against. If you get a rivalry win against Miami, certainly that's going to impact your class. Or if you upset Florida, or if you upset Clemson, or if you get any of these, I think it's really who you beat, and just how the product looks. If your product looks good and people see it and it's exciting and it's what we've been hearing from the spring, I think that's going to gravitate people. I don't think you have to have a win total. I think certainly 8 or 9 would put you in a good spot, but I think overall, I think a lot of it is about who you beat for me.
Let's see. There's a lot of people ask about who's going to commit next. They're like who's most likely to commit next. Just look at the list of
Yeah.
dates, right? Those are your most likely to commit next of guys who are involved. Colton, Forkpa, Wilson Zaire's expected to commit soon. Like those are those guys. I don't think we need to go in depth in that question. So how about this? From our guy KPR 1964, Coach Norvell seems to be closing much better this cycle. I would assume the assistant coaches have been a huge upgrade in recruiting. What are your thoughts? Michael, we'll let you start on this one.
Yeah, the assistants have been dramatically, just better from my perspective. Certainly, Tim Harris Jr. has killed it. They got one of the best receivers class they've ever, had in a long time. Certainly, we know Evan Cooper, who they got from Nebraska, has done a phenomenal job with the safeties. Even Herb Hand, he's certainly got a lot of top guys in the class. So there's a lot more aggressive recruiting. There's a lot more you feel attention to detail to what they're doing, and the big thing with recruiting is closing and finishing the recruitment. And they've doing a really good job for a lot of these recruitments of why they've gotten so many big names. They've done a great job at finishing the recruitment. It's easy to get in there and hey, you're the team that they mention a lot, but it's different when you're closing and it's time to finish. And the thing that has impressed me a lot about this staff is the fact that they've rallied for a lot of these recruitments. A lot of them they were trailing, and then they came all the way back and pulled it off. I mean, guys like Brandon Bennett and Kevin Carter, that was a long ways away from getting these guys. Ernest Rankin, the guys like that, they had to really rally, and I think this staff speaks to that. So there's been a dramatic change as far as what I've seen from the staff. Whether it's aggression and their organized NIL. I think the NIL is a little more organized than what it probably was last year, but it's kind of easier to do that when you have these type of recruiters. So I think these coaches have done an outstanding job so far.
And John, what do you think about the kind of uptick in recruiting for FSU right now, even coming off a 2-10 season?
Yeah, I think it really starts with Norvell. I mean, he's always been billed as an energetic head coach recruiter, but I think he gets undersold in terms of the depth that he can get to with these recruits. I mean, kids love Norvell. I mean, no matter what class, what position, when he gets involved, kids are very high on him individually. And then, of course, of that carries over to Florida State. And I think with this new group in particular, and I'm sure this was a part of the hiring process for Norvell and this overhaul that we saw, a lot of cohesion with these guys. I mean, you brought in coaches in groups almost on offense and defense. And I think that cohesion, those batteries have helped because a lot of recruits, when they talk FSU, it's not just one coach. Even if Norvell's involved, it's position coach, it's coordinator, it's off the field folks, and of course Norvell on top of it. So I think that combination of almost group recruiting and that aggression and energy that Norvell is already known for has helped to stabilize some of these battles. And just like Mike said, not only did you rally for a lot of these kids that are on the commitment list, a lot of the ones who jumped on early are still very much, under consideration from other programs. So to hold off, prospect XYZ from so many schools over such a long period of time, when you're talking, Tidarius Hughes, Ephraim White, Trey Bell, guys who have been on board for a long time, they really haven't wavered, even though a lot of programs have tried to jump in and out. So I think, again, that collective belief that this thing is going to stabilize, but also that group recruiting that we see on both sides of the ball, I think that really helps, because if you're a 16 or 17-year-old kid, you're saying, hey, FSU's got 2 or 3 coaches reaching out to me every day, as opposed to school X where maybe it's one coach once a week, so you really feel like Florida State is prioritizing you more than just about everyone else because of that strategy.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, I love to ask these kids, like, who do you feel like is contacting you the most, or who do you feel is pushing the most? And like John said, having all those guys reaching out does make it feel that way, to where, man, only Lane Kiffin's hitting me up. Well, I got Tony White, Mike Norvell, John Papuchis, Coach Riz, like everyone's hitting me up. Meech is hitting me up, like all these guys. So it does make you feel more wanted for sure. And that's what these kids love. We'll go with a few more. Our guy Tennis Ump had a very similar question to that, so thank you. Bolden 4 asks, will FSU take another running back? They've shown that they want to, right? They've had multiple come in. Carson Baker is one to show that we still think could be one down the stretch. But yeah, they've proven that they want to take another running back right now. What we'll end with is, who is your prediction from our guy Sent 76? Who is your prediction of a player not committed that if he joins FSU, he's likely to bring the biggest impact?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I wish I would have been asked a couple days ago, because Chauncey Kennan would have been such an easy layup with this kind of question, you know, with the cachet that he brings and how he's shut it down and he's solid. It's always been sort of the dream school for him. You know, I think the offensive line is going to be key. You know, I think that is really a position where if you're going to change the culture and start to flip things, it's got to start there. So I'm going to go with Zaire. I think he's the type of guy, you know, grew up, you know, following Auburn. His brother went there, SEC, all of that with Herb Hand. But I just think that type of international battle, and then it qualifies as a state of Georgia win as well. I mean, I think those elements make it really solid and can really sort of switch some perception positively for Florida State. And obviously, you know, he's a mammoth, you know, recruit anyway. You know, the size is incredible here coming out of Germany. I'm wondering when he's going to make the decision, just like everybody else. But I do think Florida State is in the driver's seat there against not only Auburn, but Alabama as well, which has been kind of a school sneaky in this recruitment. So I think he'd be the one going forward that you'd say, hey, if he pops for FSU, that's not only an insurance on the offensive line, but kind of a statement win.
Yeah, there's a lot of great choices. I think for me, man, if you got a top linebacker, the really, you know, coming to this class, whether it's either a top linebacker, but I would say Trenton Henderson out of Pensacola Catholic. That would, to me, shift a lot of different narratives. He's committed to another school. We certainly know what LSU's done, the program itself. So that's a, you know, one that if I had to pick one, that would be one I think that could dramatically shift, you know, kind of the way nationally your team's looked at. But certainly a linebacker would kind of fit that as well. You know, certainly we're going to wait on a few announcements, but I think linebacker is certainly, you know, we see a point where that's a place where they could certainly add a lot more, you know, talent there. But overall, I would pick Trenton Henderson. What is it about FSU? What have they done? Obviously, we talked about the coaches. They're awesome. They've been done a great job. They're aggressive. But what has kind of been the shift nationally that you've heard with recruits when it comes to, you know, this surge that we've seen with FSU, where you know, they've landed like 12, 13, 14 commits, you know, through this cycle? What have they done? What's kind of shifted as far as what recruits are telling you about FSU?
Yeah, I think the main ingredient is again low-hanging fruit here. FSU's getting great kids on campus. You know, that official visit window between the end of May and late June is becoming the key window for every program. And I think when you are trailing, or when you are, you know, when the road is looking up and you need to move up somehow, you know, these visits can really shift things with a recruit or recruitment overall. So I think first element is getting top targets on campus for these official visits, whether that's a commitment that's maybe wavering or an undeclared recruit like a Chauncey Kennan. I think those elements are still important towards building a class. And we all know now the key NIL factors, they really get discussed during official visits. So it's not just, hey, getting him on campus, look how great Tallahassee is. Yeah, all that takes care of itself. The photo shoots, all that stuff, yes. But now this is a, hey, let's sit down and really discuss what something could look like. And I emphasize could, because, you know, Florida State's got a young staff that has adapted to all these rules, all these changes in the sport. And I'm told they initiate a lot of the conversation when it comes to what it's supposed to look like, whether it's NIL, rev share, any of those elements. Florida State is initiating and creating that conversation. And that's important on a lot of fronts. One, the parents. How many parents are just looking at this like, is my kid going to make $1 million, or are we going to be able to, you know, get a nice car out of this deal, or somewhere in between? So I think FSU being proactive and trying to sit down with the parents is very important here. And then obviously for the kids as well. I think presenting a realistic front is very critical in this NIL era. Hey, this isn't going to change today. You're not going to get $1 million tomorrow. This is what it could look like, rev share versus NIL. And I think that education is almost invaluable there. So I haven't heard a lot of programs initiating that conversation. It's almost still viewed as we have to talk about it. So let's kind of do that at the end, right? Maybe on the way to the airport kind of deal. But I think Florida State kind of starting from that point with recruits, and we've heard a lot talk about this, is important to clarify, because it's very confusing. Even for us who live and breathe recruiting and we cover it every day, it changes every few months. So we see the market changing. We see new, barriers being broken by these deals or potential deals. So clearing out any of that smoke is really critical. And I think Florida State being proactive about it has led to a lot of these verbal commitments, because you've already got the energetic staff, the young staff, the group recruiting, all the stuff kids like, but now you're also developing some trust to say, hey, if I do go here, at least I have a realistic, sample of what it could look like, as opposed to another school saying, hey, it's, $750K the moment you sign, which is unrealistic. So I think some of those intimate conversations have really, moved mountains for Florida State recruiting. And that's why there's so many guys jumping on board, not only in state, but far from home. The guys who hadn't visited a lot, that one visit changed a lot in their recruitment. And I do think that's a big reason.
Go ahead, Matt. You could chime in a little bit. That's a hard act to follow. John hit on a lot of good points, but what's kind of your thoughts on kind of just what's really shifted with this program?
Yeah, to start off, just getting all these verbals, I think Jaden O'Neal added the gasoline to the fire that kind of led to a bunch of dominoes falling, right? I think it was a bigger question than we thought, not having a quarterback in the class for that long. And that led to, then you saw receivers come on board, right? Like Devin Carter. And now you have this really good receiver class, probably the best, like one of the best, if not the best in the country. So that was something huge. And then right after that is when all the defensive dominoes fall. So I think, again, really just kind of saying the same thing John did, of the energy of the staff being this new young staff. Like Evan Cooper's been good. Meach has been a guy behind the scenes who's been really good with the defensive line, with Tico and Rankins. So I think it's a combination of everything. And going back to what we said earlier, like FSU likes to make kids feel wanted by having all these guys hit them up. It's not a one-man job. It's not just Mike Norvell's job to close out these kids. It's Tony White's job. It's Cooper's job. It's Surtain's job. It's Herb's job. Like it's everybody's job all together. It's not just one person. And I think that's made a huge impact on getting all these verbals and getting on a fringe top 10, which we didn't think was possible coming off a 2-10 season a few months ago.
Yeah, no doubt. Certainly, there's been a lot of impact of different coaches throughout this whole process. Certainly, we've touched on a lot of different things and a lot of different coaches. I think we've already addressed the coaches stuff, but just in general, John, we talked about the coaches, but what do you think it does? Let's just hypothetically say they win that season opener against Alabama, or they win. What will big wins mean to this as far as recruiting? Because you got a lot of flip targets in there. I've had 5 of them I labeled out earlier this week, but there's a lot of guys they're circling back to, like certainly we mentioned Trenton Henderson. There's certainly Carson Baker. There's going to be others like T.J. White, who's committed to Tennessee. So there's going to be other guys that are committed to other programs. But what would winning do? How would that shift things, and what would it do to recruiting as far as with FSU? Do you feel?
Yeah, Mike, I like what you said earlier about how you play and who you beat. I think that's a critical factor here. A lot of these prospects, of course, are deciding between, Florida State, Miami, Florida State, Florida. I mean, heck, Alabama's had some battles with the Seminoles, and those guys are all on the schedule, for Florida State. So I think there's a lot in front of it. And it's not just the win-loss record there. It's that style. How does it look? How does it feel? This is, perception is reality in recruiting, right? If you feel like I don't know, if you feel like Texas A&M is the best recruiting program and you get that offer, it's probably going to mean a lot to you. So if you feel like Florida State is on the verge and then you think you see it against anybody, you're going to feel that much more comfortable. So I do think the season is so important, and just how it feels, how it looks. Is it exciting? Is the offense different? Does the defense fly around? Is that aggression put on display? Do you see a lot of, for instance, like, hey, are these corners going to be playing a lot more man coverage, with a younger, more aggressive scheme, with maybe some depth at the position? That's something recruits like to see. They want to know that the coaches trust them in those situations. So it could be something as intricate as that, but really overall, I think it's that perception. How well does Florida State bounce back from 2-10? No kids have talked numbers with me in terms of how many wins it'll take, or even which games they'll have to tune into or overcome. But we all know the big names on the schedule and how Florida State performs there. Again, perceptionally, I think will say a lot about not only the potential to recruit at a higher clip, but the stability of the coaching staff, which is really what it comes down to. Again, I use that Florida example on purpose last year because at this time there were not a lot of people who thought that could be stabilized based on the schedule, based on where recruiting was at coming out of the summer. And right now, Florida State is above that. It's ahead of schedule relative to what we saw last year. So if the on-field element takes care of itself to any stretch, this class has a high ceiling.